I want to introduce you to one of my favorite people. We met when this leader was completing a really difficult turnaround of a very large, complicated organization. And turnaround artists usually have to make very shrewd decisions about what the organization is going to keep and not keep. In this case, it meant people, it meant traditions, it meant policies, it meant community outreach and things, and the process of doing that was very stressful. And here's another thing that happens in leadership. Seldom does a person that execute a turnaround get to stay and build what they fixed. And so as we got to talking in an executive coaching relationship, it became really obvious that the community and this gentleman wanted to be there to grow the organization that they fixed. And so we got into a really intense discussion about good leadership, about 7Fs, about the cornerstones of goodness. And Matthew Allnatt is someone who really does live the idea of spreading positivity. And in the process of talking to him about the opportunity to fly in from LA, he asked me that we did not do it in February. But we found a date in May, so please welcome, all the way from Los Angeles, Mr. Matthew Allnatt.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very positive and I'm very nervous, so I apologize. I'm going to take a moment to warm up. I thought a lot about today. If you haven't noticed, I'm wearing my Minnesota, I think it's the Gopher colors, so I'm trying. Someone said to me, brown nose them a little bit, like you do the members. So anyway, I'll tell you one other quick story about this morning and how wonderful I feel. I like things the same. I don't like too much change in the things I have control over, because then when I get to work and everything changes from the moment I walk through the door, it's okay, because I know there are some things. I've had the same watch for 20 years, and I love it. My wife is not quite as positive about the watch, and she brought me a beautiful watch about 3 years ago, and I never wear it. My watch broke, and my wife was so happy. So she's getting it fixed, though, but I'm wearing my new watch. Isn't it beautiful? The only problem is I'm not used to reading it. It doesn't glow in the dark. I can't read. I wear glasses. So this morning, at 3:30 a.m., I was ready, dressed to come to this, because I read the dials wrong, and I was sitting there in my suit and tie saying, goodness gracious, I guess I'll go down for a cup of coffee. Right as I was leaving the room, I glanced over at the digital clock and it said 3:30 a.m. So I've drunk a lot of coffee. I'm ready to go, and nervous. So interesting combination. My journey at the club I'm at currently started about 7 years ago. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got there and the wonderful things that have happened to me to prepare me for when I got there, even though I didn't really know it. I've kind of come to realize that with Paul's help and guidance, and also being put in certain situations. We call them all opportunities. Everything is just an opportunity. My life started back in England. That explains the funny accent. Some people think I do it just to see if I can get paid a little bit more, but no, I am English. I have been kind of went through an interesting time in my life very on. My life had been planned out for me by my mother, and knew exactly where I was going to go to school, where I was going to go to university, and what I was going to do for a living. Then unfortunately she passed away when I was 4, and things changed. I had a brother, a 2-year-old brother. My father was working for a very large American company that demanded that he move around the world. So he at the time was just about to move to Holland, and 2 years later was about to move to South Africa. So he got quickly remarried because he needed someone to take care of the two of us, to someone who was delightful but wasn't too comfortable with suddenly having 2 young boys. But they agreed that once we both turned 6, we'd head off to boarding school. So at 6, I went to boarding school, where I stayed till I was 18 years old, and I loved it. It was fantastic. I was at school for about 9 months a year. Then I'd go over and find out where my father was, which was great for traveling. I've lived in Korea, South Africa, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, all those different places. The one thing about it that I didn't really think about at the time until I became a father, I never had my own room, never really had any toys and things like that. But what a great opportunity to prepare me for being a father, and some of the things that I learnt really subconsciously I try to give to my children. So anyway, went to school, boarding school, and loved it. You know, it really is like being in a gang. You know, you're with 500 boys, and you hang out and you do all the things. You have slipper fights and all those sorts of things. I noticed that one of the books is head, shoulders, knees, and toes. I remember having competition to see how quickly you could do it. So I was thinking of reminiscing back about that. Left school at 18 with no education. I picked three amazing subjects that really were going to help me in life. Ancient history, and English literature. So I was ready for the business world. So basically came out with not knowing what to do. My father had hoped with what he'd paid for this education that I was going to head off to the London School of Economics. I wasn't going to go there, and when I told him, he said, well, then you can figure it out yourself. That was, I think it was about 18. It was the last time I saw him for quite a while. So I said, well, what better off to do than grab a backpack and come to the United States of America and take 3 months off? I mean, at 18, that's what every serious 18-year-old should do. And I tell you this story only because it's been 30 years since I was in Minneapolis. The first place I arrived, myself and a very good friend of mine figured out the easiest way to get around the United States with no money was to drive other people's cars. And there was something called a way drive just over 30 years ago, where if you were moving to a different state or a different city, they would take your car there. They wouldn't flatbed it. They'd get someone to drive it there for you. Now, just think about the sorts of people you would have driving your car who would be going to these different places. But thankfully, there were 2 young students who didn't care. We had no money. So we found a cheap flight from Gatwick to Buffalo, and then we went to the office, and the chap said, we've got a car, it's an old Cadillac, someone's changing their business and you're going to go to Minneapolis. I said, what? Where? Minneapolis. I'd never heard of the place. So anyway, drove here. It took a day and a half or so. They give you, there's all sorts of rules. Got here and we had our backpacks, and then we decided that, drop the car off, let's go and find a youth hostel. Throughout Europe, there are lots of youth hostels. You basically walk in. Minneapolis, 30 or so years ago, does not have any youth hostels. However, with our positive nature, we kind of figured out that if we were around a university, there's usually dormitories and things like that. And we were lucky enough to meet a couple of guys, and we actually spent 2 nights in a fraternity at the University of Minnesota. These chaps were wonderful. They took us out to an amazing bar, and I enjoyed myself. And I met my first real American woman, and it's what I love about America. I love about Americans. It was a young lady, I think this was in July. She was bartending, which is kind of unusual, wearing a tank top, gorgeous, full-on tan and everything. I was mesmerized. And she spoke fairly colorfully, and she was a student there, and I was in love. I was just like, wow, the women here are amazing. They're forthright, they're honest, they're great. So I plucked up some courage and said, what are you doing later? And I said, I'm not doing anything. What are you going to do? So, well, I'm going out to a club. I said, great, that's fine. Let's go out to a club. So almost to the day, not quite to the day, but just over 30 years ago, I went to First Avenue and saw Prince. So it's kind of, why am I here? It's that big circle. So anyway, now to get on with my life. I went back to England, really with nothing to do. Was trying to figure out what to do with my career. I found a friend of mine who was going to school at the London University studying hospitality. Or as my father said, you're going to go to school to learn to be a waiter. And I said, yes. So I went to university, and I loved it. I mean, one thing that I love in my life is I love good friends, I love good times, I love food. I'm a foodaholic, and I love wine. And so this made sense. It's something I love doing. And so went to university, did very well there, loved it, worked in the mornings and the evenings in different places, loved the people I met. It was a very, very different world in hospitality in England just over 30 years ago than it is in all of our the hospitality business. But from there, I came out, decided to go, and I was offered a job at an incredible hotel up in the north of England, brand new. But I'd never worked in a corporate environment before. And as my team could tell you if they were here, I tend to be a little bit spontaneous. When you work in a corporate hospitality group, there's not a lot of room for spontaneity. If something happens, you turn to page 83, it tells you how to handle that situation. I tend to think and kind of go, well, what if we... No. This is what you do. So that lasted about 3 or 4 months, and I said, okay, I'm going to go back to London, and there I worked in a restaurant for a while, picked up all the great habits of working in a restaurant, which is working 6 days a week, 20 hours a day, smoking 40 cigarettes a day, living off coffee and alcohol till late in the nights with chefs. And after about a year of doing that, I looked at myself in the mirror one morning and said, you're killing yourself. So I'd like to say then I had this epiphany and whatever. No. Eggie Johnson, who was with me here in Minneapolis, called me and said, hey, I'm in Bermuda. I'm at this small hotel. I'm leaving to go to Australia. Do you want to come? And I said, where are you? Barbados? He said, no, Bermuda. I said, where the hell? He said, don't worry, I'll send you. And so he sent me, the owners called me, and about 2 weeks later, I quit. I ended up in Bermuda and started at a small hotel. Where and of course Eggie Johnson had completely oversold this. You know, he said, "Oh yeah, it's this young people. It's great. It's about 60 rooms. The manager's dynamic. Blah blah blah." So this hotel had 40 rooms. Average age of most guests was about 80. My general manager was an elderly lady who'd been running the hotel for about 35 years. And I basically did everything from cleaning the pool to sweeping the driveway to being the maitre d', etc. And kind of quickly realized this is probably not the right place to go. But I'd met the owners of the hotel, who had 2 other hotels on the island, and they also had a private club. And they knew my background in food and beverage especially, and they kind of knew some of the names on my resume. And so they said, you know, come on, let's come over, and we've got a private club, work into it. And that's when I fell into the private club business and started my journey in private clubs. And it was amazing. And all these things that Paul's so much more eloquent about me is what private clubs are all about. We're all about family, traditions, values, all of those things. So anyway, I'm going to cut short and kind of head to, I got married. I had a 1-month-old. My wife was from Los Angeles. And she said, I'm not staying on this island anymore. We're out of here. I said, great, let's go back to England. She said, no, we're going to LA. And I said, all right, let's sign an agreement, 6 months. If I can't find anything or do anything there, because it's LA, remember, I don't have a handgun, I said, we'll come home. I can safely say that it took me 6 months to realize LA is the most incredible place in the world. And I loved it. I loved it from the moment I landed there. I love the diversity. I love the energy. I love the feel of the place. I love the people. I love the challenges, or as we say, the opportunities. I love the way it moves. You know, I've found the place that I'm going to die in. It's great. I feel really great about that. I don't need to move anymore. So anyway, went there. Had a great resume if I was applying for a job anywhere in the world apart from LA. No one had heard of any of the places, so I got a job as a bartender for an inspirational leader. Figuring that if I proved myself, I would kind of get on in the club. So within 6 months, he'd fired the assistant manager and made me assistant manager. I stayed at that club for 7 years. It was great. It was right on the ocean. I worked and looked at the ocean every morning. And I lived 3 minutes from home, which was one of the key things that I wanted. I wanted to be close to my family. I wanted to be, despite all of my hours, I wanted to have time to have family dinners and all of those things. That was very important to me. After 7 years there, I was offered in my 30s an opportunity to go to a country club similar to this. And by the way, I am a rarity. The average lifespan of a general manager at a private club is 3 years. They hire you, the board hires you. They're in their usually first year or so. Within 3 years, your whole board is turned over. A new group of experts come in, and they say, well, you know, he wouldn't be the guy I would pick, and there's this really great guy over at this club, and so the next guy comes in. So it takes a lot of perseverance. You have to be a chameleon, and, to kind of fit in with who are the next people coming in, what do they want, what are their desires, how can you make it work. So I ended up staying at Wilshire Country Club for 13 years. Again, great club, it was close to home, and I like stability, despite what people may think. Then about 9 years ago, I was offered the job at Jonathan Club, and I was going through a transition in my life and felt that given the size of the Jonathan Club, it wasn't right for me. I finally made an honest, really, really honest decision that even though I thought I could rule the world and could do anything, I really couldn't. And I knew what the dedication it would take for me to run this private club. So I waited, and as I just mentioned about lifespan, the manager they did bring in was fired after a year and a half. Can you imagine that? Moved all the way from New York with his family, blah, blah, blah. Year and a half later, you're out. Basically because he didn't quite agree with some of the people that came onto the board afterwards. So I was approached again and decided to take the job. Perfect timing, 08, 09, joined the club. 500 members quit in my first 3 months at the club. We lost $4 million in revenue, literally within 3 months of me starting. I'm like, yes! But one of the most unbelievable things occurred. Again, all these opportunities thrown at my lap. The board looked at me and said, help. I'm going, what? You want help from me? I work for the most powerful people in the world. I work for experts. Everybody knows how to do my job. They know how to cook. They're lawyers, they're accountants, etc. I never get a chance really to do anything. I'm just going to stand there and move around. Now this club's saying help. So that's when our journey started. And it's been absolutely incredible. We've taken a club. We have 3,600 members. We're one of the largest clubs, as Paul mentioned, west of the Mississippi. Which equates, by the way, to about 10,000 people when you add spouses and children. We have 2 great facilities. And I got to create a brand. I got to create a vision for an organization that was over 100 years old and completely change their culture. Start talking about things like, let's get out from behind these walls. There's so many misconceptions about this club. You're not taking the opportunity to do things. So we started doing things like community outreach, which when I start looking at these things, it's like, wow, clubs are private. They don't want to talk about themselves. We started, and you'll hear about this, a scholarship fund for our kids, our employees, and the average tenure of most of our employees is about 20 years. And we've raised $1.8 million. We have 23 kids who receive up to $40,000 over 4 years going to school. But it's a branding thing. It now tells you something about my club. I know that it's a great place. Nobody else does. Do you discriminate? Do you have women members? What's the diversity there? Someone said to me the other day, this is how nice it is sometimes to run a private club. I sat down at a United Way luncheon, and I sat next to an elderly lady, and she said, well, how many Jewish members do you have at your club? And I said, wait a minute, let me get out my Jewish count book. Let's see, 1, 2, and I said, honestly? I said, I don't know, we never ask. I said, but the funnest Hanukkah party that you can go to is in December at the Jonathan Club. So come and enjoy it. I'm looking at my time running out, and I knew I'd speak too long on this, but anyway, we've made some amazing challenges. The reason I've succeeded, though, is because of my team. I've decided I'm a great coach. I'm really not good at what I do. I'm not a great food and beverage manager. I'm not a great bartender. I'm not a great accountant. So what I decided to do with this massive organization was hire the most amazing people around me, from my chef to my town manager, my beach manager. They're all brand new. And they're amazing. And my job is to coach them. And with the help of Paul, my coaching is getting better. I look at their 7Fs every quarter. I'd never heard of 7Fs or what that was. I'd heard of the F word. I hear it in the kitchen. But the 7Fs, I'd never heard of it. Now I'm doing my reviews of my staff right now, my leadership team, and I care about their well-being. I'm kind of getting it finally. That if they feel good about themselves, if they feel inspired, if they're happy, that's my job. They know how to do their job. I've hired the most skilled people I could possibly find. The only thing that holds them back is how they feel about themselves. So my job is to coach them up. I'm an incredible coach. I could get your Vikings into the Super Bowl next year. No, honest. Honest to God, I didn't know that. And all these things that I kind of talk about, this is what prepared me for that. I was going to take off my shirt today as well, which wouldn't be very attractive. I mean, Paul, trust me, I need to go on that same diet. But I say all these things, and I look out, and I seem kind of fairly confident. If you looked at my back, there's a lot of scars. I've learnt and been taught lessons along the way. It's never been easy, but they've been incredible opportunities. Everything that happened to me prepared me for what I'm doing right now. And we're trying to transform. I mean, my other goal, are there any club managers in here, by the way? Okay, thanks goodness. I'm trying to transform the club world and the way clubs think. What we're doing in the community right now, I have to leave early Saturday morning, not because I don't like Minneapolis. I have to go back for a service day. We started doing service days, getting out from behind these walls. We take 75 members once a month to different things, and they paint, and hopefully I make a connection. My job is just kind of sit, kind of hope it will happen, and then maybe that person will start mentoring, or the guy that's the vice chairman of Aon, maybe he'll agree to be on the board of that small clinic that we went to, etc., etc. But you see, I want all clubs to do that. Because I know what these clubs represent. I know they're expensive to join. I know very successful people belong to them. But we've got to stop hiding. That's the kind of the interesting thing, is that we all do this, but then when we come to our clubs, it's kind of our private place. But then everybody outside the wall looks at them and goes, eh. And you can just do these simple little things. And as I say to club managers, the crazy thing is you love it. You love it. It's common sense. I was talking to some people at our table right now. We give more to charity now than at any time in the history of this world. If your business is not participating in community outreach and making a difference, I'll hit you. I mean, and I'll show you how you can do it. Taking the organization that I run, a private club, and making them do that, making them make a difference, was really, really difficult, because there are still a lot of people that push against that think that we should be closed up. Did you all read the news the other day about a golf club in England that will not change its men-only policy? So they're taking the British Open away. They're actually being taken off the roster, and you look and you go, are you kidding me? People still think like that? Are they Neanderthals? Why? You want to run around with your trousers off in the clubhouse or something? No, but it's like, but grow up. But that is still there. You know, we deal with interesting issues. Trust me. I just had a same-sex couple join my club. I have a lot of members who are in same-sex relationships. There's only one thing we never thought about. In our bylaws, when we post new members, we show the picture of the member and their spouse. This couple was married. And so, of course, I get all these phone calls. What do we do? I said, let's try it. What a great opportunity. We're going to see what our membership feels like. You've got to do it. You can't change it. We've had same-sex couples, members of our clubs, forever. So of course, we put it up there. It gave me a great indicator of where we've come. You know, the guys who are 80 and older, of course, called me and, you know, made stupid comments about showers and blah, 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 you know, whatever. But all in all, the club just was, I didn't hear a thing. And I was like, hallelujah. I talked to clubs on the East Coast about this. You know, they laugh about the Caitlyn Jenner and all of those things. We've already thought about it. I don't know whether it's going to happen or not. We're the West Coast, but we've got to think about those things. You know, it's the centerpiece of what we talk about. We want to be the flagship of the West Coast. If any of you ever are in LA, please come and visit us. When you come into our club, you'll figure out everything that I believe the West Coast is all about. First of all, what's very different in our club than a lot of clubs who are very exclusive, we make you feel welcome. Some of the places you walk into, especially the really exclusive clubs, when you walk in, you know, the doorman will kind of look at you. It's that beautiful look. I fired 3 sommeliers when I started the Jonathan Club. They were all Europeans like myself, but they'd come over and they'd look at you and say, do you want to order some wine, sir? And you kind of go, okay, here we go. How much do I have to spend for this guy to like me? So we got rid of them. We hired 3 incredible young women, and now their only goal is to make people drink. Isn't that what it's all about? No, but isn't that what it's about? I'm sitting on $1.8 million of inventory. I've got 1,100 bottles of wine on my wine. It's like, isn't that impressive, Matthew? And you know what's even more impressive? I don't sell a single bottle. Anyway, we turned it around. I'm sorry that I didn't quite fill in as much as I should. As I said, I was a little bit nervous. Thank you for having me. I'd love to, if anyone has any questions, I will talk about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank Paul.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming in. So I promised you a bundle of positivity. So who role models positivity around you that's inspiring in your life? That's your discussion question. Ready, set, go. So just a couple of questions for Matthew. We'll do our best to get you out of here on time. It really is a rare opportunity to be able to grab an organization that's really in a downward spiral, stop the bleeding, get the turnaround in place, and then get the chance to actually build it up again. So you've stated to the people at the Jonathan Club that you want to you want this to be your last job. You want to retire from this. What have you learned about yourself and your leadership in that journey?
Well, when I won't tell you the interesting story on why Paul started with this. It wasn't quite as positive as maybe some people thought. And of course, we looked at it. I'd been informed that this chap was coming in to evaluate my management team. And I said, well, if the guy's as good as he says, he'll see how great we are and how great all of you are. So let's go. And of course, Paul spotted it right away. And again, that's the way we looked at it. And then I opened myself up to working with Paul. And when Paul came to the club, it's a big club. It's had a lot of turnover. And I think for a while I was working through fear. In my first 4 years there, we spent close to $40 million on projects. I mean, I was turning it around. I was moving so quick, doing it all myself, fingers in everything. What I've really learned is to step back and really not get so concerned. And then and what's happened with that is my eyes have opened up and I see where we can go, and I'm really, really happy. And if we fail or if something changes, I really don't care anymore. I mean, I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. And the journey is great, and if it doesn't work out for some reason, I'll move somewhere else. But in the meantime, I'm loving it. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it really is.
You hung up your superhero cape.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
100%.
Yeah, well, so the Jonathan Club is an icon in the West Coast, and our friend John here, who's at our table, is going to be staying with you this weekend.
That's right.
Isn't that something? Tell us that there are some really, really special things. I'll bait you here. My favorite selfie I've ever taken in my life is in front of the Ronald and Nancy Reagan picture where I wasn't supposed to be taking pictures, right? Yeah, so I did that a couple of years ago. Tell us about a few of the really special things about this organization.
I'll tell you a couple of little things. One, we kind of resurrected. I love history, as you know, I studied it, but you can always find something. I told my son to be a history major because I said everything that's going on today has happened before. It's just at a different time. And but I'll talk quickly about the Reagan Award. The Reagans were members of the club. They used to go to the beach quite a bit. This was after President Reagan was a president. And we wanted to start an award after him, and he said, absolutely not. He said, there are patios named after me, there are awards, there's a bloody library. I don't want any more awards. So we said, okay, fine. So we said, okay, this wasn't me, this was before my time, how can we come up with a better idea? So what we came at them with was, let's do an award that you give to an iconic American that you bring into your home. You call this club your home away from home. So someone, not the White House, that's easy, but someone you bring in your home, you break bread with. So it started, and you go in, and when I came to the club, it's one of the things that inspired me to start there. I turned around and looked at someone that I only saw once, but which I'd seen more, which was Billy Graham, and he'd received the award. Since I've been there have been 5 awardees. Probably one of the greatest moments was meeting Neil Armstrong. That for me was a moment I can remember as a kid. A lot of talk about him. But I will tell you the one thing I'll tell you about the individuals, David McCullough, John Williams, who wouldn't accept the award because he was afraid his speech would not be good enough. The humbleness of these people is amazing.
Yeah. So you have a beach club. You talked about that, so the town club downtown and then this beach club. Just give us a little bit of idea. It's about to be summertime in LA. Tell us a little bit about what the beach club is like.
We know. So I'm in the process of, we have about 500 employees, which balloons to 750. I have to hire 250 employees to help an already large staff. Our beach club is open 365 days a year. It never closes. Opens at 5 in the morning, closes at 11 at night. Now we're heading into summer. We serve 600, 700, 800 people every night, Friday, Saturday, Sundays. We have a kids camp for over 400 people. At the beginning of the summer, in fact we're doing it next week, I grab all my managers and we split into teams. We pull straws. One gets what we call the self-serve beach experience, the other gets the Jonathan Club experience. And we start from the same location. We said, okay, here's the goal. You've got to go find parking, change into your bathing costume, grab a bite to eat, grab a newspaper and go and sit on the beach. If you do that at the Jonathan Club, it takes about 15 minutes. You drive in, we valet your car, you walk out, there's equipment set up for you, we'll bring a drink to your chair if you're waiting. The other guys have to go down the road and go onto a public beach. It takes them about an hour to do what we're doing in 15 minutes. And I remind people that's really what generates all of this interest. Our club's changed. When it first started, it was a city club primarily. We bought the beach, believe it or not, 87 years ago. It was basically a summer place between Memorial Weekend and Labor Day. Now it's heaving. A lot of our memberships moved to the west side. It's one of the most energetic places you can go to if you ever get there. Just if you need something to bring you up, just go down to our beach club. I mean, everyone's happy there. It's a little bit easier than the town club. Everyone's in suits and ties and they're here for a meeting and you're welcome. I go down to the beach and there's some kid with no clothes on running by and his mum's coming after him and you're just going to go, wow, I love this.
I told you, did I tell you? Let's give it up for Matthew Allnatt.